There's so much to actually say about this government at the moment that they've done wrong. And I've actually realised now through the research into what governments have actually been up to with the committee reports and other various other activities in the past, which I don't think really people have paid too much attention to. They've actually pretty much tried to completely erase us or erase any effectiveness possible, except they're giving more powers to the police over MPs and Parliament when the whole point was that the police and the courts didn't have any power over Parliament. We actually were meant to, Parliament was meant to be its own judge, but we could complain to it. And those complaints were meant to be obviously official, right? If we were wrong, then they decide that we're wrong after we've submitted them. But they've changed the rules to prevent us from actually really being able to effectively or properly actually submit them. They're not even actually officially accepting them or considering them as accepted. It's a little bit like what the police are doing now with professional standards. Like, if you are not the victim yourself, you can't complain to professional standards, or they won't put it down as, it will get recorded as a complaint. It will get noted, but not actually officially regarded as a complaint. They're trying to actually strip down. I'm actually amazed that that there's even it's astounding that they've even got forms that you can complain with anymore. And whatever is left of them, it's no wonder that they're completely and utterly held in disregard, or they've got policies which get their staff to pretty much write everything off, so nothing even has any standing anymore, right? Or not going to act on it. And when it gets to the ombudsman and people like that, or you complain to, the process is like jumping through hoops, that, you know, people either give up, get tired, or get deterred, right? And you're not it's meant to be illegal to deter people from pursuing petitions. Now, I just don't know how they've got the nerve, these MPs, or how they dare come out with what they've been coming out with. But they've been talking about, this word contempt. It's actually Parliament and the MPs who are in the greatest and highest levels of contempt, right? Well, they're trying to make out that, it's us or whatever, right? Now, they've also conjured up this guy. They've conjured up the name of this guy who's got the same name as me, right? And they've put him on one of these reports. And the report is actually similar to what things I've been submitting. So there's something going on there. And in this report that he's put, it itself is misleading, right? And I would actually never come out with a report like that. The report itself is completely and totally misleading and totally contrary to the things I put. And they're also, in this report, they're trying to lay the blame sort of on past parliaments and governments. So it's their fault, or whatever. Now, this is the thing. We've got this word here, frivolous, right? Now, they also usually couple it with a word called vexatious as well, right? But they use this word frivolous. And when they use this word frivolous, they're trying to use it as in, like, you're only doing something for the sake of doing it, and, or you're only doing it, for some sort of, revenge, or because you're angry or whatever, or, as a form of harassment, or, like, there's no substance behind it, right? Now, this is the thing. If you look at the meaning of this word, frivolous, there's two items here. The first is of little weight or importance, not worth notice, or given to trifling, right? So now, given to trifling. Now, let's say we've got a Labour government, right? And the Labour government got voted in and it's wanting to try do certain things, but then the people don't want that government to do certain things, right? Well, we might try and stop them, right? Like we're trying to do now with all these big petitions, like with 3 million signatures or 1 million signatures, or, and then, now, this is the thing, right? The government, the Labour government at the moment, are trying to make out that anyone who opposes them or doesn't like what they're doing, it's automatically frivolous, right? Just because we oppose them, right? Now, this is the problem. A 3 million signature petition is not frivolous. It is not of little weight or no importance. It is of immensely huge weight and great importance. So is a 1 million signature petition, right? Now, also, if you had a very, very, very serious complaint, right, that would not be of little weight or of little importance if the accusation was immense or severe. Like, for example, past committee reports have been lying and misleading people, right? The accusation in itself is immense and huge, right? So if it were to be true or found true, then, it would have a significant impact, right? Now, if it was not true, and if it was fake, that would be weak evidence. But the claim is still immense. It's still an immense claim. The claim itself is not frivolous. Now, if the claim was that the MP was, messing people around with their appointments or not replying to people, or if the MP was, very slow in replying to people, or he was, being rude or something like that, or I don't know, it's of less importance, right? So if the complaint was that, I went to see the MP and he didn't hold the door open for me, right? And I found that rude, right? If you complained about that and did a petition to Parliament about it, right? If you did a petition to Parliament and the petition, just you signed it, and it was like, the MP didn't hold the door open for me, he was being very rude. That's quite frivolous because it's not very serious, right? It's not very important, really, although you might be offended. Now, if you manage to go out of your way and, let's say you got 10,000 people to sign it, right? It has got a great weight of signatures behind it, okay? But the accusation is not very serious, right? So if you got, 10,000 people to sign, if you managed to get 10,000 people to sign a petition that your MP, didn't hold the door open for you when you went to meet him in his office, to let you in, even though it's got an immense weight of signatures, what they're going to do about it, you can't really sack an MP. Although, if you went even further and got, 50,000 people to sign it, or more people than got the MP elected, it could be possible to recall the MP or get him removed, right? Or if you went out of your way to get an immense weight of signatures. But the complaint is frivolous, right? But you could make it into something serious. Now, this is the thing. In contrast to that, you could do an investigation yourself and you could find out that the government have actually been completely and totally corrupt, right? And the fact of that, the truth of the matter and the evidence is correct, but you might not have anyone supporting you, right, or signing it, right? Now, if you sent that complaint into Parliament or even by petition, right, it is no frivolous matter. It is extremely serious or of great importance, right? Now, if they don't accept the petition or reject it, or if they say they don't want to publish it, they don't want people to know about it, or if they, say that you're wrong, right? They say that you're incorrect. It's you that's wrong, right? Now, all of those scenarios are where they're kind of like, and they might not do anything about it. And then obviously if nothing gets done about it, then it doesn't get corrected. The issue doesn't get corrected, right? So there is a very serious matter which is in no way frivolous, right? But because you are being obstructed or blocked or deterred or hindered, right, now you can't get it resolved. Now, how would you get it resolved is by getting immense numbers of signatures on it to make them act, to make them do something. Or you could, well, and how do you get those signatures is by raising awareness, right? Now, obviously, if the claim is very serious, right, then it's no frivolous matter. Now, if you were proved to be incorrect, if you got a proper investigation, right, and it found that, you were wrong, then, the MPs have got nothing to worry about, or Parliament's got nothing to worry about, because you weren't right, okay? Just like if you go to court and you get prosecuted, but, you found not guilty, right? But obviously, if it's the MPs or Parliament doing something wrong, you're not supposed to go to the courts. Not if it's something they're doing wrong in their job in Parliament or as a process. You're going to go to Parliament, right? Because committees are supposed to investigate it. But this is the thing. We're not really getting any action or investigation unless you submit a petition and make them do it. But this is the thing. Sometimes you need to use privileges for the process, because it's powers. You need to use powers, right? You need to use powers, like, obviously, it's a power and privilege when you send a letter into Parliament and don't have to pay postage. That's a privilege, right? Or going to local archives, Suffolk Archives or Norfolk Archives, or, to get evidence. Usually, sometimes you have to pay for those services, but like if you're doing a proper investigation for Parliament, there are certain exemptions in the law where you might not have to pay for that research material if you can get to the material, because they've been moving the archives so we can't get to a lot of the evidence. They've been moving it from Kew Gardens, and then we were locked down in the pandemic, so a lot of information has been very difficult to get hold of for the past, since at least 2019, 2020, for the last at least 5 or 6 years, right? And this is when we could use that evidence to put a stop to this government, to put an end to it, right? And have a new government called. Now, basically, right? So, now, in this report, which I've referred to when they've got this guy, they've got this guy who's got the same name as me, right? He's going on about, they didn't want people to know about privilege claims, or they didn't want people to know about the use of privileges, or if it was, vexatious or whatever, they didn't want it to be printed. Now, let me tell you this, right? Through the 17 and 1800s, when you petitioned Parliament, there were tens of thousands of petitions, right? Very high numbers through the 1800s, and they were put in the journals, and they were summarised in the journals who submitted it and what it was about, right? And there was no problem with that. There's no problem, even for election petitions. When they accused MPs of cheating in the elections, right? It's an accusation against a member of Parliament, right, for cheating in an election. It got put in the journal. So what's the problem? Now, later on, when we get into the, 1900s, the 20th century, and through the war and after, there's very, very low numbers of paper petitions. Now, I don't know if there were actually a lot more getting sent in, but they ended up sort of like throwing them away or disregarding them, or not. Maybe they've vanished into the ether of history now. But on the record, there were very low numbers, right? So we don't know if there were higher numbers or not, but it's presented now as if there were very, very, very low numbers of petitions, right? 65 a year, or 135 a year, or even 50 a year, compared to 80,000 or 50,000 or 25,000, right? For whatever. So there are extraordinarily low numbers of petitions, right? So hardly anyone would have been asking to use privilege according to those figures unless more knew about it, right? So there wouldn't really be an issue. There wouldn't be an issue. So why in this report is he talking about, they wanted to omit privileges claims, or not mention them, or not have to mention them, right? But there can't have been that many anyway. So I just don't think they wanted to have any at all. They didn't want to acknowledge that they even existed, or we could have it. Now, if you look in the parliamentary journals, besides the election petitions, if you look in like the earlier journals, they actually, right, if they issue, I mean, I've got some examples I could tell you, right, but you know, you can type it in go into the Internet Archive or wherever they've got them, because you know there's not that many of them online at the moment on the Parliament website because they've been moving everything, right? But it says like you know, Mr. Withersworth shall have the privilege of the House or whatever, right? That's just a claim. Sometimes it was servants of the House of Lords or whatever. It wasn't actually that much of a big deal, right? So they're recorded in there, right? You know, even for you know various mundane matters or whatever. Now the problem is that right, you're meant to be able to. Parliament is meant to be its own judge, right? And matters to the Court of Parliament, even complaints about Parliament, are done by petition to Parliament because no other court can judge them, right? And this is meant to be why this is the claim of why they scrapped election petitions in Parliament and put them to the courts, because they said that the MPs weren't trustworthy enough. This is what they claimed. Well, if the MPs aren't trustworthy enough to hear their own election petitions, then how are they trustworthy enough to do anything? Surely, right? Now, the problem with election petitions, once they took them out of Parliament, is that they actually started to cost a fortune, and then later on, they brought these deposits in, and no one can afford it, and then lawyers are making loads of money out of it. Then it ends up, when they say, oh, you're very brave to bring an election petition, well, no one can afford the deposit, right? There's a financial barrier. Now, they might say, oh, well, that's to stop frivolous claims. Well, a frivolous claim would be one that wasn't very serious, like, but this is the thing. The actual election offences were things like, oh, he bought someone a drink or something like that. Now, if there's anything more frivolous, it was buying someone a drink. But they weren't regarded as frivolous. They were regarded as actually very, very serious election offences, right? Influencing elections, and this is when not many people voted, right? Or even, election expenses, like someone, he paid someone to vote for him, like he paid someone, he gives someone a £5 to vote for him or something like that. Now, today, I tell you what, right, if Keir Starmer was found to have given someone £5 to vote for him, right? If Keir Starmer had gone out in the 2024 general election and he was in a pub and he gave someone £5 to vote for him, right? One vote, right? And therefore, instead of 16,000 whatever 800 votes, he got 16,801 votes, right? Now, if you petitioned Parliament about that, or even brought an election petition, which cost you £5,000 deposit, that in this day and age is frivolous, right? One vote. But it's actually a serious crime. But it wouldn't have really affected the outcome of the election, right? But it's still an offence, right? But if you petition Parliament about it now, you could say it's frivolous, but you're meant to be able to petition Parliament generally about elections, but not about one seat, right? But this is the thing. That's frivolous, but back then it wasn't as frivolous because hardly anybody voted compared to now. It was only people with a lot of money who voted, right? Now, this is the thing. If anyone has a legitimate claim that is valid, right, which is quite a serious matter, right, of Parliament, like, oh, the Privileges Report is full of lies, it's contemptuous, that's very, very serious. Now, this is what I think, right? I think that there are lots of valid complaints that are real, right? That actually are true. Now, if you've got the whole country, which is like, over 60 million people, well over 60 million people now, right? And, there's quite a lot of people finding out that the government are doing things wrong or criminally or illegally, right? Then that's quite serious, but they're going to be inundated and swamped with very, very serious complaints, and there's going to be very, very serious consequences to a lot of people, right? Now, I think that what's happened is these big parties like the Labour and the Tories, They don't want people to know that they're that corrupt and criminal, and they're trying to protect themselves. And the unfortunate thing about having a political party is that when you've got, one or two people in the party like Boris Johnson or whatever, and they lose credibility, it rubs off on the whole party. It makes the whole party look bad. So they don't really want their members to be accused of anything or anything serious, because then the whole public will know, and then they will want to vote for that party, or they just replace the people or get new people in, right? But the more serious it is, the more effect it has on the party. Now, this is the whole basis for Charles and the royal family, If anything is said or done around the whole country which, disrespects or dishonours or makes the, king or royal whatever look bad, then the Privy Council, everyone who's sworn the Privy Council oath has got to tell the king about it straight away, right? But they themselves have got to disregard it, which means they can't act on it. So, and they will never actually be allowed to see the king as being capable of doing anything bad, evil, or wrong, right? So, apparently he can't do anything bad, evil, or wrong. It's not possible, right? And that, I think that the government and the political parties like the style of that, and they've kind of adopted it themselves. They think that they can't possibly do anything wrong or do anything bad. Or the more serious it is, then the more it has to be disregarded, because obviously the more damage it can do to the whole organisation or party, right? So, in fact, what's actually happened is that they're only accepting publicly and on record and acting on frivolous claims, like the MP's expenses scandal. Now, you might say, oh, that's not frivolous. It's a couple of expenses. It's peanuts. It really is. The Lord Hanningfield thing and all that, I fiddled a few expenses, compared to if they get found and acknowledged as lying and completely and utterly misleading in the privileges reports themselves and other reports and other business of government and, elections and so forth, then it's going to be catastrophic for the whole parties, right? And this is what you've got like now with, all the Conservatives are going over to reform, right? So actually, the more important it is and the more serious it is and the more true your claim is, it's far from frivolous. And then you would need protections, and then you would need privileges, and then you would need, to be able to raise the alarm to more people and get them to sign it, and then to get action on it. Now, what's actually happened is the government instead now have removed, reduced, and practically nearly erased, or they've been trying to remove, erase, and downplay our powers and abilities to hold them to account. So we haven't really been to hold them to account for the very serious and non-frivolous matters that needed action. And instead, all they do act on is all the rubbish you hear in the newspapers, like Pip Diddley Squeak, right? Oh, Boris Johnson, this and that, right? Oh, and it's a slap on his wrist and he stands down, right? And that's actually what's happened. They're actually only, if it can't really have, if it's not capable of having any serious implications on the government, you can have Boris Johnson stand down, you can have him in hospital, ill or whatever, whatever. But if it's actually serious and important, you're not going to get any action on it. And they've started using this word to try and make, what's happened is they're using this word frivolous for anything that they just basically want to, toss aside, right? To evade, escape, or get out of it just by calling it frivolous. So they're actually using the word frivolously themselves, right? When it's far from frivolous. And it's the processes by which we can actually get action on these very non-frivolous matters, which they're gradually erasing. Like now, the Petitions Committee will not even publish your petition. They say, oh, it's vexatious, frivolous, or whatever, but they're all very serious matters. But they're actually trying to make out that you can't accuse them of wrongdoing, but wrongdoing's far from serious, far from frivolous. Wrongdoing is far from frivolous is very serious. But they're saying that you can't have it because it's serious, because it actually accuses them of wrongdoing, and because it actually could be proved to be right. They're only letting you use e-petitions now to amending and strengthening the laws because it doesn't actually accuse any MPs of anything or point out any wrongdoing. So they're actually taking, it's exactly what they're doing with the police professional standards complaints, oh, you've got to be the victim yourself, you can't just be somebody who knows about it or saw it, right? Or they won't put it down as a proper recorded complaint. So, but then they're trying to make out, we're accountable to the police because the police are a proper professional organisation, but Parliament aren't going to be accountable to the police because the police do local jurisdiction crimes to magistrates and county Crown courts, right? The police aren't even supposed to vote, really, from the Liberties of London. The police aren't meant to even vote, right? And the police, when they're on duty, cannot support Labour or the Conservatives because that's illegal canvassing, right, in the 1983 Representation of the People Act, right? But the MPs are wanting themselves to be accountable to the police now because they think, well, actually, but all the complaints you put to the police about, Nigel Farage cheating and talking pints or anything serious, like the police themselves, taking Paul Golding's political party van that's protected and crushing it, and they will act on it. Anything that is serious, which actually can compromise the police or government, that they're blocking and disallowing and not letting other people complain about it, that they're using policy as a defence, right? And the whole government is actually now defended. But in the Crown Prosecution Service rules, it's like, we have to protect the services. Yeah, protect them from becoming corrupt by corrupt staff and personnel, not like the corrupt staff and personnel defending themselves from anyone getting anything done about it, right? And what it comes down to is, in the parliamentary journals, I cannot even find some of the cases like I found in the newspaper, that Ethel Margaret Self case, right? Look in the parliamentary journal, and all it says for 1939, for every single petition that was presented, it's a miracle that it even tells you that a petition was presented. It says, right, a public petition was presented and ordered to lie on the table, right? That's all it says. Doesn't tell you who presented it or in what it was. And then, a couple of days later or a week later, it might say a public petition was presented and ordered to lie on the table. So if you're looking for Margaret Ethel Self's case, which was in 1939, when, you look through the journal and you can't find it because all it says, repeatedly is a public petition was presented and ordered to lie on the table. So which was hers? Which day did she present it? Now, if it was like in the 1700s and 1800s, it actually would tell you there and then, right, in that journal, it says, Ethel Margaret Self, dangerous driving petition, and a short summary of it, right? But I'll have to try and find the end of session report for the Privileges Committee, it might not be in there. I've actually spoke to Suffolk Archives. I looked in the petty sessions for Lowestoft, and they said her case is not there, right? So I don't know if it will be in the assizes or not. But I'm finding difficulty finding out about it. Now, her story was in several newspapers, right? So I don't think that it's fake because it was in at least, 5 or 6 newspapers. Some of them were quite big newspapers like, Leicester or whatever. So, and that was about 13 or 14 days before. So they were actually removing all information possible in the journal where you actually know what's going on, right? But they didn't have any problem with that with the election petitions, being in there. They didn't have any problem when someone submitted an election petition accusing an MP of something, and even if they didn't hear it or whatever, it was in there, right? So they actually don't want us to know anything or anyone to know who's complaining about anything. Now, the thing is, if there's something very serious and no one knows about it, and the implications are severe. These people, if no one knows about it, how can you make them act on it, right? They could just ignore it or lie and say not true, right? Or say that you're not right or honest. But if more people know that it exists and they can sign it, and then there's public pressure and then they start protesting, you can make the government act, obviously, right? And then more people can obviously also look into it and find out whether it's true or not, right? This is the thing, right? Now, when you remove all that, there's no incentive to act, right? Look, if you've got a corrupt organisation, right, and then the police, you report it to the police, and then the police, if the police haven't got any powers or aren't able to arrest them or aren't able to try it in court or don't have any prosecutors or any funds, you can't get anything done about it. Nothing will get done, right? This is the thing. So, and this is what's actually happening now, even with the police. Like, they're not investigating the things we want them to investigate or doing what we want them to do. They're actually doing, the police are doing what the police want to do, what they want to do, and now they're even arresting protesters illegally and unlawfully and miscategorising them and totally misinterpreting these prescribed groups, and not even acknowledging our privileges when we're doing to Parliament like it doesn't exist, right? And then, when we're trying to research it, the committee reports are completely and totally lying, right? So this is the thing. And then now it's got to a point where they don't even want to publish and run the e-petitions. They're saying that, petitioning is not even for that or not about that, when it is, right? So they're letting you do not what is there, what can be done. They're only letting you do what they want you to do, right? And this is like political parties who are only putting laws through that they want to put through, right? But they're not even letting you try properly. And if the police and CPS don't act in criminal things, I mean, who can afford a private prosecution? If you are absolutely loaded, right, if you had like millions or billions, right, you wouldn't even need the police. You could just go and prosecute whoever you wanted for whatever you wanted, right? You could prosecute the police for, you wouldn't need to go to professional standards or to the ombudsman or whatever. If the police, did something illegal, like, with Paul Golding's van, you just prosecute them. Right? But you need money to do that. You don't need the ombudsman, but we're meant to be paying for the ombudsman. So they're using all our money to do what they want to do, not what we want to do with it. And this is like what the Advertising Standards Authority are doing as well. Now, the ultimate manifestation of this now is Keir Starmer calling the elections off, right? Because he's the most unpopular Prime Minister in history. Everyone is, doing loads of political art, attacking him, right? They don't like the Labour Party. People don't support all this agenda that they're trying to put through, and they want to vote them out, right? So what Keir Starmer doing now is calling off the local elections. He's saying, oh, well, you're not even going to vote. I don't even want you to vote against me. But that's what e-petitions are doing. You're not letting us accuse MPs of anything or a party of anything. Like an election, it's only like an election petition. You cheated in the election, right? Oh, your committee reports are wrong, right? And we want the committee to investigate it. A number of investigations into the privileges, the number of official investigations which the Privileges Committee have done, right? I've only literally can count them on, one hand or two hands, or Boris Johnson or whatever. They're official, right? But there are all these illegal things or wrongdoings of the government which should be being investigated, which aren't being doing because they don't want anyone to know they exist or acknowledge it, and they don't even want us to be able to complain about it or make them do anything about it because they won't even run the e-petitions now. And then as for the police, you're lucky if you get it logged, and then if you complain to professional standards, if you're not the victim, then they won't even record it as a proper complaint, right? Not like, they don't want you to be able to... the complaints process, they want it to be sterile, like, it's there to make it look like there's a complaint system, but in fact there isn't. And if you say, well, that can't be true because, the Ombudsman's getting thousands of complaints and they must be doing something, the Ombudsman must be doing something because, they're actually turning up for work and people have got complaints. Yeah, but actually, they're the frivolous ones, right? The government and police will only actually act on frivolous things. Now, you say, well, that's not true. Well, actually, in the scheme of things, when the police are going after, a lot of the time they're running around, arresting old ladies now for protesting. I'm not saying that robberies, burglaries and thieves are frivolous, right? I'm not saying that. But it's far from frivolous. It's far from of little weight or importance of something that the police do that is very serious, completely illegal, like, threatening to crush Paul Golding's van and then making him buy it back, right? Which is a contempt of Parliament, or arresting all these people illegally when all the police are acting contemptuous, right? And not like, the illegal road signs issue, or, the ULEZ or whatever. So they're only primarily and mainly, they're only really acting on frivolous stuff, except for, when someone gets murdered or whatever. But whenever you seem to get into a position where you're going to get, you manage to raise some kind of awareness about it, some other incident seems to happen in the press or whatever, or someone in, Bondi Beach goes shooting someone up, or someone in a school in America or whatever. And it's those, you see, those incidents aren't what we call frivolous by this, right? And they get in the news and then everyone's in uproar about it, right? But notice, it never gets in the news when you accuse Parliament of completely and totally lying and misleading in a Privileges Committee report, right? They won't even let you collect the signatures on it officially and have it on the petitions record. They don't even want you to know it exists, but it's far from frivolous, right? But if someone goes on Bondi Beach shooting people, but yet he hasn't been found guilty in a court, they want everyone to know about it before he even... But, you're not meant to know about crimes until people have been innocent, until being proven guilty. They're making these incidents, the news are putting out before anyone is even prosecuted and convicted, right? And that actually makes the person infamous. But that's the element that the MPs vehemently, and by God, they bloody well don't want the accusation to be aired, right? Unless it's Mike Amesbury and he gets filmed punching someone and it can't be denied, right? And this is the thing. But in the 17 and 1800s, there wasn't a problem with it. If people thought there was an election offence and then they got people to sign it and support it and you got evidence, you send it in and they summarise it. And if they find out that it wasn't true, then it wasn't true. But now, they don't want anyone to know about it, or even it cannot be officially recognised, and this is the thing. All these petitions have been in, and I think a lot of the issues are serious, right? The more, in fact, the more serious it is, and the more correct and true, the more they try and make out it's frivolous or come up with a utter excuse and lie, like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about, or it's not clear what you're asking, or we can't accept accusations of wrongdoing. Do you know what? The policy of that e-petitions committee is frivolous. It is a frivolous policy, right? Because if you accuse Parliament of something and no one signs it, right, then They don't have to debate. And they don't even have to respond unless you get 10,000 signatures. But if it could possibly be true, and it gets onto the record, and then they didn't act, you don't need any signatures, because you actually, well, they don't have, if you can get them to look into it, but the more obviously true it is, then, it's like that Bondi Beach thing, maybe he didn't run around on the beach shooting people. What was it then? AI? Was it fabricated? Was it an actor? This is the thing. You take it for, we assume until, but this is the thing, is innocent before guilty. Looking at the state of Parliament now, they hold us in contempt, right? This Prime Minister calling off the elections is the exact manifestation, right, of the e-petitions team calling off our redressers for grievance, right? They've called it off, right? They've called off accusations of wrongdoing, call off Christmas, they've called off grievances. You can publish a petition now asking for amending or strengthening the laws, right? But don't try and make out that anyone in Parliament has done anything which might not be frivolous, right? In fact, amending and strengthening of laws, a little bit, they're all most of those petitions are frivolous matters. We want to change the tampon tax. There's never been anything more frivolous in the history of fucking mankind than getting the fucking tax changed on tampons, right? In light of other serious things which could be done, right? Maybe for women, but yet Theresa May backed that. That's frivolous, right? But if you submit a petition with strong evidence that their reports are fake and false, which is a very great contempt, right? You're not allowed it. You're not even allowed to let anyone else know about it. And that's not how Parliament is meant to work, going by through the whole 17 and 1800s. And I don't care what amendments they claim they've made, right? We made some, made some resolutions or whatever in, 1977 or whatever, right? A lot of those are erroneous. A lot of those are wrong, and this is the thing. And actually, going by the actual proper law, they cannot conjure up something for a parliamentary resolution, right, if it's actually set in law and they never change the law. And the thing is that the way those committee reports are talking for privileges, they're trying to explain away or downplay our role and part in causes and matters to Parliament, and they're trying to make out that there's only them, right, and it's all about them and their show and their proceedings, when it's actually not. It's only a small part of it. And they're going on about Article 9 all the time. The whole thing is the privileges. The whole 1688 Bill of Rights is the privilege, right? And the freedom of speech is a small fractional part of it, right? But they're trying to make out that, that is the Article 9 is the privileges of Parliament. No, actually, it's not. It's the totality of the whole fucking thing, right? It's so they're doing this with the police. They're doing it, and actually, when you telephone the ombudsman and speak to the ombudsman, right, on the telephone, they're going, there are some areas of Parliament we can act in, like, maybe if it's this or that, but we can't act when it's MPs, right? Yet, in this report I'm just reading now, it's actually talking about the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman Commissioner, and they're saying that if they accept and take on a complaint, it can be covered with privilege. Now, if it's covered if you've got the privilege of the House, then you've got the privilege to make accusations against actually members, MPs, because that's the whole point of what an election petition did, right? And you can still have election petitions for the whole thing, not just one seat, right? And that's what we do, hold MPs to democratic direct democratic accountability in Parliament. So what I think the confusion is with the Ombudsman is this. It might be that I would have thought that they can investigate if something's been done wrong in Parliament or by MPs, but because the Ombudsman themselves are not members and aren't Parliament or a committee, where the Ombudsman can take legal action on our behalf, like against the police or against the NHS or whatever, they can't prosecute members of Parliament because it has to be done, obviously, if it's for matters concerning Parliament. It usually had to be, voted on or done by the MPs, right, with their own hearings, like Boris Johnson, right? But that's not to say that the Ombudsman can't investigate it, right? Look into it. To find out if the MP did something wrong and then submit a report to the committee. I think that's where the confusion is, going by what's in this report here, according to that. But I think it's been misinterpreted, and they just have been rejecting or refusing complaints that concern or about the behaviour of MPs, right? If part of the complaint involves MPs' behaviours in Parliament, I actually, according to this report here, it's actually suggesting that they can look into it, can investigate it, and come to some sort of determination, even if they can't themselves judicially prosecute. They should be able to, instead of going to the court and like prosecuting the NHS or prosecuting the police on your behalf or bringing a civil claim against the police or whatever, they might actually be able to refer it to the committee to act, right? And I think I'm pretty sure that's where the confusion is with it. But, Starmer's calling off of the elections is exactly the dirty, diabolical trick that they've been doing the whole time. It's like squeezing the pimple and the pus coming out, right? All of the problems now with this e-petitions team, all of the problems with the police professional standards, all of the problems with these areas of government, right, when they will not act or they're making up policies to try and get out of acting, right? And you know what they said and David Cameron, when he's going, prisoners shouldn't have the vote, if you've been convicted, your convicted criminals shouldn't have the vote. It states in the 1640 short Parliament proceedings that says that even the most meanest of people should be able to participate in Parliament, right? Have a democratic say in the country. So, that actually contradicts what David Cameron's belief is. And you know what? Tony Blair said that, I'm doing this for the greater good of humanity. What I actually think Tony Blair means actually is that, we're greater than you, we're good, and the greatest people, the goodest people, are who we should be doing it for, over all the rest of humanity, right? Which effectively, at the moment, even though the entire country hates Keir Starmer and Labour and can't stand them, right? Labour are like, we call off the general elections for the greater good of humanity. And by the way, we still think that we're the greater good, even though there's never been a less popular Prime Minister in history, right? So it's like, Starmer's doing it for the greater good of humanity because you're all scumbags and Starmer's, the saints, right? No, Starmer, you're not. Get the ballot box out and we'll see. So it's just a cheat. Starmer and his light crown prosecutors, they're dirty cheats, right? He's a charlatan, a scam artist, right? And whenever you get into a position where you're going to beat him, right, and prove it, he calls it off. Call it off, call off the elections, call off e-petitions, call off police complaints, professional standards, you're not the victim, you're not the victim, you just saw it, you're just a witness, why should you have a right to complain and have it on a record? This is the thing, these people, right, are all about themselves, and they actually, they believe that they're better than everyone else, and that no matter what they're doing is good. You see, you're getting into the area of the Privy Council overflow. The king can do nothing wrong. This is a Starmer, the whole country. No, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm doing this for the greater good. Well, what about all these, complaints? Well, they're not doing it for the greater good. They're all evil. I'm Starmer. I'm good. They're all evil. So I'll just call off the elections. I'm doing it for the greater good of humanity, not for humanity, for the greater good of humanity. He's always a greater man. So this is the thing with Starmer. It's a miracle that they've even got polling stations, and these big major parties have completely infiltrated and taken over politics, and they're the ones who are coming out with these, committee reports and policies and God knows what. We should, and this is what Steve Barrett, the barrister, has been talking about. He said that we should ban political parties, make them illegal, and we should make MPs get along with each other. We should make independent MPs. Like when you say, we should make it illegal for them to affiliate with any organisations. They're allowed to affiliate with a policy, but they're not allowed to affiliate with a group or organisation. They can only support a law or tax change, right? And this is the thing. And then they won't be able to come up with these strategies, which end up becoming business and corporate strategies, which end up being planning to take over the world, and regardless of what we think. And this is how these big corporate entities are. We're the greater good, we're the greater good. You know what I mean? Well, no, you're the greater financial power because you've taken all the money off us and we're all poor, right? This is a thing. But, that Steve Barrett Barris has been talking about, it would be good if we didn't have political parties, and we should make these MPs be able to, choose a speaker and then vote for a prime minister, and then, and then the prime minister decides who's going to be on his cabinet, and so forth. And, like these prescribed groups that they're giving on us, political parties should be prescribed groups where you're not allowed to have them. If we find out that they've got any clubs or secret organisations which are, unless it's a committee, right? A committee of parliament, outside, parliamentary committees and things like that and so forth. And I would go as far as to make it so the police can't vote, because they didn't used to be able to. And in America, when they started the Constitution in America, they didn't have office holders voting in America. The police, I don't think the police having all these weapons and guns now and military equipment should be, it's, maybe the military shouldn't vote either, Maybe the police and military shouldn't vote, and they definitely aren't supposed to be allowed to engage in politics, because the police are meant to be enforcing local crime, right? When it comes to parliamentary crimes and offences, you're meant to collect signatures on it, and it's meant to go into Parliament, right? It's meant to be us that, petition, complain to Parliament about what it's doing, and hold it to account in Parliament. But and then if you didn't have political parties, then you get more legitimate committees. You get much more legitimate committees which weren't trying to protect the party interests and things like that. But anyway, so frivolous, far from frivolous. Far from frivolous.